So we're going to start things off here today by talking about who maybe the breakout player of the year candidates could be for the Broncos. I'm going to share my thoughts and my reasoning using statistics, and then we're going to use Broncos fans' suggestions. I mean, there was common consensus among several players. Starting things off here, in terms of breakout player of the year candidates, my first selection, I went offense and defense. My first selection was Jerry Jeudy. And the reason I say that is I think Jerry Jeudy, despite the fact that he had probably in his own mind and in the mind of many people as well, he didn't have the season his rookie year that he had hoped for. But I don't think any player in the NFL outside of those who really had a lot of success did. The comparison that people are making right now is, well, Justin Jefferson's a better wide receiver. I think Justin Jefferson was probably in a better situation. You give Jerry Jeudy, Kirk Cousins to throw him the ball, maybe his rookie year. Maybe Jerry Jeudy puts up the same amount of numbers that Justin Jefferson did. I mean, it's all just debate. It's all hearsay back and forth right now. I know my man Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings, he and I would probably debate this. But, for Jerry Jeudy, when we look at how he performed, maybe the drops were probably the biggest issue for him. But outside of that, he was a fun player to watch. He's a special player, and you can see the talent that he has. So in 2020, he had 52 catches. 52 catches on the year, despite the fact that he rotated through 4 different quarterbacks. That right there is amazing in and of itself. Out of his 52 receptions, 39 of them went for a first down. So he was one of those players that if you needed to stretch the field because of his route running ability, his ability to create separation, I mean, he does a really good job of getting defensive backs. If he sees that they're inside leverage, he's going to give an outside move to get them to turn their hips. He's going to cut back to the inside because he gets that separation, that leverage. All he needs is about a half an inch of separation, and he can do damage. The only issue sometimes, once he would create that separation, he'd be looking to get upfield before looking the ball in all the way. I think that'll change this year. That's an optimism thing that I think that Broncos fans have. But we talked about Noah Fant on yesterday's episode of the show in terms of his average depth of target. This is how far down the field he is when the ball is thrown to him. 13.5 yards is his average depth of target on the season last year. That's pretty dang good. He's one of those guys that you can stretch the middle of the field with. That's what the Broncos utilized him with. He had 5 broken tackles on the season, 10 drops, though. That is the concerning part. He absolutely has to clean that up. He's got to drop that down, in my opinion. When we talk about drops, too, there's some that can be factored into catchable or non-catchable. Sometimes if a pass is thrown behind you and you have to body adjust, it's tough to have the expectation that you as a wide receiver are expected to make that type of catch, even though that we see players do it. It doesn't always apply that way. So the drops were an evident thing. I guess that Los Angeles Chargers game was probably the most frustrating, I think, for Broncos fans when it was looking at Jerry Jeudy. But he met with the media afterwards. I mean, he took it like a champ, and he came back and he bounced back the next week against the Raiders, a 92-yard touchdown. And you love to see that about Jerry Jeudy. Nobody on the Raiders could cover him, by the way. So there's that. And there were 6 interceptions thrown by the quarterback when targeting Jerry Jeudy. So that's probably a product of the fact that there was no Cortland Sutton. Tim Patrick was the other option there, and he had a very phenomenal year. But Jerry Jeudy, I mean, the pressure was on him last year to step up to be the number one guy. And obviously quarterbacks would force the ball to him because he is that shiny, flashy weapon. And, I expect to see more of it in 2020 in terms of the Broncos trying to go to him. So can they reduce the turnovers? Can they reduce the drops? I think that'll be a big determining factor as to whether or not he can break out this upcoming season. But I'm going to leave us here with a bold prediction. In 2021, I have a bold prediction. I believe that Jerry Jeudy will have one game next season where he has 200-plus yards receiving. You heard it here first on the podcast. If I'm right, someone buy me coffee. If I'm wrong, I'll buy everybody coffee. So that's going to be probably 1,000 people. But outside of that, Broncos country, I appreciate you. That's my offensive selection. My defensive selection, outside of the obvious, I've been a big fan and supporter of Draymond Jones's work and his productivity. I'm going to go with Shelby Harris, though. For him, he secured the immediate long-term future on a 3-year deal. He is healthy. He's ready to go, and he's ready to contribute even more. When you look back at 2020, he only played 41% of the Broncos' defensive snaps. 41%. Yes, he missed 4 games due to COVID. He missed the last game of the regular season against the Las Vegas Raiders with a knee injury, and that obviously factors into it. But in those 11 games that Shelby played in 2020, he had 6 hurries, 8 quarterback knockdowns, and 17 total pressures. I mean, this is a guy consistently week in and week out that was fighting double teams. He was creating opportunities for Mike Purcell, for the inside linebackers, for the guys on the outside edge, Malik Reed, Bradley Chubb. A lot of that is because of Shelby Harris and his presence on the interior. Pro Football Focus, I believe, put something out, or one of the USA Today sites put something out there saying that in terms of interior defensive linemen, the Broncos don't have any in the top 10 defensive players on the interior D-line. maybe Shelby Harris can change that narrative, but he's got to put together a full-on season this upcoming year. And if he does play a full season, I think his numbers are going to be massive. I think the contribution, especially with Vaughn back, with Bradley Chubb on the outside, Draymond Jones being able more than likely to get the start on the other opposite side of him, defensive end, Mike Purcell returning, I think that there's going to be a special season in store for Shelby Harris and just for the Broncos defense in general.